Splendid greetings, students. I hope this finds you and finds you well. If you're not well, well, sorry. It's not fun. Alright, we're looking at the 4th and 5th presidents of the United States of America. James Madison, James Monroe, the two James. If you ever forget which order they come in, M.A. comes before M.O. alphabetically, which is how I always remember this. So we're going to just look at the big things going on each one of their presidencies. And to kick things off, we have the War of 1812. War of 1812 really defines James Madison's presidency. There's some other things that go on, certainly, but it is really the one thing we're going to worry about for this president. So as you can see by this map, the red dots on the map are the battles that occur during the War of 1812. And majority of the battles occur on the U.S.-Canada border, which Canada was owned by Great Britain at the time, in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area, and then down in New Orleans, and along the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of Mexico. So what goes on in the War of 1812? Well, good question. Big issues, namely the United States. We're only about 20 years removed from the American Revolution, so there's still a lot of issues and resentment and tension between the United States and Great Britain. So there's already this kind of idea of honor, that there's all these insults that are being thrown at the United States that Americans perceive, and they want to fight back. They don't want to take insults of Great Britain lightly. And some of it involves those impressments that we've mentioned before. Britain is messing up American trade. There's the British are supporting Native Americans in the West that are raiding American settlements. And eventually it results in a declaration of war. We're going to look at a bit more about why, or should the United States have gone to war, so we're not going to worry about that much now. So for this video, though, we're going to look at what happens in the war. So throughout the war, a lot of it happens at sea. So this is an image of the USS Constitution, which you can find in Boston Harbor now. It's the oldest commissioned Navy vessel to this day. It's still in service. And it's nicknamed Old Ironsides, and it comes from the War of 1812. There's a great number of battles that the USS Constitution partakes in, and it never loses. And there becomes rumors that the British believe that the sides are made of iron. And this happens because so sailors witness cannonballs bouncing off the sides of the Constitution. So for the most part, the United States performs pretty well at sea. They win a great number of battles against the British, which is surprising, since the British have the strongest navy in the world at this point. So the Constitution is kind of leading this group of ships that, namely, one of the big things is their crews are very good. They're well experienced, they're well trained, and since the British have such a large navy, they can't afford to train and have crews that are so good. However, while the American Navy does perform well, it really doesn't have a huge effect on the war. Interestingly enough, the British are, with their Navy, they use it to free a lot of slaves, which gets a number of Americans quite upset. So they're off the coast, these battles. There's also some battles in the Great Lakes for the Navy. And even the Pacific Ocean, American ships are attacking British ships as well. So this war doesn't just occur just in the United States, but really all over the world. Other things that are going on, the British invade. They take over Washington, D.C., and they burn the White House to the ground. It is called the Chesapeake Campaign. And Initially, it doesn't look like the Americans are doing quite well at all. Throughout this campaign, too, we have the bombardment of Fort McHenry, where British ships are namely just shooting cannons at Fort McHenry. And this event becomes immortalized. It's in Baltimore, Maryland. Becomes immortalized in the Star-Spangled Banner. Francis Scott Key, who writes the it's a poem initially. He writes the poem and he's watching these bombs bursting in midair, and that these soldiers are still standing. The fort's still standing. So, however, the fort stands and the British are unable to take over Fort McHenry. In the northern theater of the war, as you can see here, we have a great number of battles. The United States tries to invade Canada, and luckily for the Canadians, and why the War of 1812 is seen as a great victory for Canada, and currently many of their national heroes fought in this war, is because they are able to repel American forces on a number of occasions. Americans are unable to successfully invade into Canada and are forced back every time. In the northwest, in Ohio and some other areas, there are Native Americans who are being supported by the British. And in those campaigns, mostly in the south, we have what this image is called the Fort Mims Massacre, and 400 settlers are killed, which, to be fair for the Native Americans, are their land is being drastically taken. So this is in what's near currently Mobile, Alabama. Tennessee has battles. Georgia sees a number of battles with Native American troops. And the man that comes as an American is Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson comes along in, and he is the main leader of the American forces and is able to defeat a number of the Native American tribes. Andrew Jackson continues down to New Orleans, where he engages in the Battle of New Orleans, which defeats the British forces there as well. So, in all, the United States holds their own against the British. They can't expand into Canada, but they do maintain the borders of the existing United States of America, except for Maine, which at one point is occupied by the British, and the White House, which needs to be rebuilt. After the war, the Treaty of Ghent. The Treaty of Ghent is signed by the Americans and the British, which ends the war and is really the last large engagement between the British and the Americans from then on. Well, that's enough for the War of 1812. It's an interesting war if you ever feel like reading about it more. Alright, next we have James Monroe. James Monroe has three main events or situations that are going on in his presidency. First one is called the Adams-Onis Treaty. Adams-Onis Treaty, the big thing to know about this is it gets Florida from Spain. So Florida cedes Spain to the United States. And if you look at the map here, it draws this line, which is now the border of New Spain, which is now Mexico and the southwest of the United States, and American areas. So Adams-Onis Treaty sets the boundaries, and this is one of the big problems, was boundaries were not established. And it really gives the U.S. now a route from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So Adams-Onis Treaty, number one. Number two, we have what's known as the Missouri Compromise. As the United States starts expanding, as you can see here in yellow, we have the state of Missouri. Missouri applies for statehood. They want to become a new state. So, if you look at the map, there's already been some states that have arrived now. We have Illinois, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama now added on to the United States. And Missouri wants to become a new state. The problem, though, is there are free states in the United States and there are slave states. And the problem now is, what should the Missouri be? And what happens is that Missouri is determined to become a slave state, and the agreement is that Maine, if you look in the top right, Maine becomes then a free state. So it keeps the balance of power between the free states of the United States and the slave states. And this is going to be a slight issue as we continue, and we'll get to the problems that the U.S. now is on this balancing act of trying to maintain slave states and free states, which is going to not work out so well, as we see in a couple weeks when we get to the Civil War. Alright, that's it. Farewell, have fun, until next time.